welcome to Inner Woman Wellness. So today I am joined by LJ, who is an endo nutrition and fitness coach, and I'm super excited that she's agreed to come and have a chat with me today. So welcome, LJ.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's so good to have you. And so what really drew me to you is obviously I've been talking to Erica, who's from the Holistic Beauty, but your energy, I just love, like your vibe, your whole page. I'm just like, this girl on the same wavelength. I love it. And we'll go deep into different parts of how you operate in due course, because there's lots of stuff I want to pick your brain about. But for all of our viewers, it would be great just to have an intro to you, your endo story, the kind of experiences that you had with the medical industry, and kind of what's led you to here in your holistic way of living.
Right. Where do I start, right? I'm like, how far do we go back? As far as who I am a lover of information and education. I love to educate, mentor, and motivate women. Even in my little TikTok, which I didn't, it was like, I admit, it was my very first one. Wasn't sure how I felt about it. I'm going to be honest, it took me 3 hours to do it. So that seconds of fame. I mean, I'm telling you, there's a lot of behind the scenes. If you're a pro at it, send me a DM. I am welcome to all advice, right? But it is like, I am very high energy. I love to just work with women. I love to empower people. I've got a strong personality, and I like to just kind of sprinkle that with everyone else and empower other people to just really, not only be an advocate for your own health, but just to enjoy your life, to be an advocate for yourself, to stand strong in what you believe in, and to not back down. I'm definitely a fighter. Like, not in a negative way, but I'm definitely someone that I will go after what I want. And I want to empower and encourage other women to do the same thing.
That's so super important. And so how long had you been suffering until you actually received the diagnosis?
So it was about, I'd say 16 years. So I started having issues when I was 14. I had a tough love mother. So she was just like, oh, you'll be all right. And you're like, no, I'm like dying inside. But some kids can be dramatic. So I can understand as a parent myself. Sometimes I'm like, if you say times I may, like the first 2 or 3, it could just be you wanting to stay up late, right? So I'm not going to put too much weight into it. It took about 16 years. Just a lot of pain, a lot of issues. For me, it was always feeling like I had constant, frequent urination, always having bowel issues. It's IBS this, it's IBS that. I mean, I felt like there were so many diagnoses, and they were all kind of in the same pelvic area. But what made it more difficult is when I started having just chronic inflammation, the endo, just the increase of my estrogen and the fact that my hormones were so high, it started to kind of wreak havoc on other systems in my body. So I was having a lot of sinus issues, a lot of like estrogen, just migraines and all these kinds of things. And when I think back, I mean, it took a long time to get diagnosed. It's a lot easier to sit here at 41 and be like, oh yeah, like something that happened when I was 12. Like now looking back, it's like, oh, it made perfect sense, right? But when these little things are kind of popping up along the way, like if you had a headache, they're like, oh, sinuses, because I moved to Colorado and I had a lot of sinus issues. And so it's like every doctor was doing their best, but it wasn't really like a collective holistic approach. Everyone was giving their prescriptions. Everyone was saying this, that, and the other. Like I said, my GI, I mean, we were like this because I was going to appointments all the time. I was having so many issues. And so to get diagnosed, it was like, okay, I'm not crazy, right? Because there's all those appointments where you go and you're like, this is what's going on. And they're looking. And then it's interesting. I say this is my fluffy version, and it's not in a bad way, but before I was a lot leaner. So it's like when you're going in with like, maybe 3% body fat, and they're kind of like, maybe if you just eat some food, it'll be better, and you're like, I'm not overeating or undereating. Like I was super active, right? I was super lean, but very toxic and acidic inside. And so it's like on the outside, the doctor's looking at you and they're like, and some of my physicians were my students. So they'd be like, but I just went to your 2-hour class and you seem fine. I don't know what you're talking about, chronic fatigue. And I'm like, yeah, during the class I'm good. But then it's like, there's days, that I can't teach. I can't go into class. There's days I couldn't check my mail. I couldn't get off the couch. And so it was hard to explain when you're going in by the time you get an appointment. Because when you need the help, it was 6 weeks ago when they couldn't see you. And then you show up and you're telling these stories of how you feel like you have the flu before your period, but it wasn't the flu, but it kind of, you're crazy, right? So to get that, the diagnosis, it was kind of a double whammy when I think about it. It was good to get the diagnosis because I was like, okay, great, it's not all in my head. I'm not going crazy. Like, I don't need to see a psychiatrist because everyone's telling me it's all up here. And I'm like, it's here as yes as in sinus headache, but it's also here. Like there's something dancing on my bladder with pins and needles all the time. But then it was also very discouraging once I kind of settled in and I was like, hold it. And I always refer to like a broken bone, you know, broken arm. They're like, hey, we're going to put a screw in. It's really bad. This is the plan. You wear the cast, your PT, you'll be back to normal. And you're like, okay, cool. I have a treatment plan. And so as I was dealing with endo, I suddenly realized, I was like, hold it, there's no treatment plan, right? Even though we're all very unique, you know, with the broken bones, certain things, you know, if you have a sinus infection, this is what we do. If it keeps reoccurring, you know, because I've had a lot of sinus surgeries because of the inflammation. So I felt like all of a sudden I was like, great, I've been diagnosed with something that there's no answer. Like nobody wanted to come out and say there was no answer, but essentially that's what it was. It was more like, you know what, we've got 50 things here. We're going to throw a bunch of them to you. Hopefully you can catch on, and whichever one sticks, we're going to just really dial it in and up the dose. And I was like, all right, you know, so it was disheartening. I was diagnosed. You feel that little sense of like, okay, I'm not crazy. This makes me feel better. You know, now my doctor knows I'm not a hypochondriac. And then it was like, you know, what do I do then? And it's just like a bunch of pain meds or hormone replacement, or like I did Lupron, and that was presented to me as a godsend. And after suffering for so many years, you know, someone telling you they're going to shut your hormones off, because what they're telling you is your hormones are the problem. So I'm like, oh, great. Like a light switch, you're going to turn it off. That means I'll probably be awesome, right? Yeah, nothing like that. I mean, my symptoms for me were worse. I was in more pain, and I was like, okay. And then it was like I was in more pain. And then I started having hot flashes and all these things. And they're like, oh, we're going to put some hormones in. And I'm like, I thought the purpose was to turn this off, but now you're telling me the fix is to turn a little back on. I was like, I'm so confused. Like it was a very, very hard road. I mean, I'll be very honest, very emotional. I'm not an overly emotional person. Like I'm very factual. I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do. If I do this, I will get this result. But when you're jumping through all the hoops and you're not getting the results, you're kind of like, for me, I had a problem with that. I'm like, I come from, you know, just how I am, a big researcher and someone I love to learn. It's like when I'm finding the research, I'm going to these trainings, I'm doing all of the not getting results. It's discouraging. I mean, it gets to where you don't want to keep going because you're just like, great, I'm just going to go to another doctor's appointment. They're going to put me on this pill. Then they have to put me on another pill for all the side effects. And by the way, I'm still in pain. So it becomes very conflicted, but took a long time to get diagnosed. And even once I got diagnosed, I think the whole, you know, satisfaction of being diagnosed, that probably died down in about a month or two when I figured out they really had, I mean the nicest way, like no effing clue what they were going to do for me, right? Because everyone's so unique, everyone's levels are so different, everyone responds to medication differently. And for me, I'm very resistant to some medications. So, you know, if everyone else starts with the 10, I have to start with like a 50 milligram. And then it's just like, then it doesn't work for me. Or I'm like all, you know, covered in a rash, or, you know, the wind would blow and I'd have issues. Like it didn't really matter. And it was extremely draining just trying to figure out like what I could do, not to really cure it, you know, because it's like when I think back, like now I'm more focused on healing my body, and that's what I know what was working. But in the beginning, it wasn't about healing the body. It was like someone turned the pain off. Like, where is the switch to not even just turn it down? Like, if I can take it from 100 to 25 and I can still function. But if it's always at 100, I can't raise my children. I was a single parent. I couldn't take them to the park. There were times where, I mean, I have to be honest, my kids may have had 10, 12 bags of fruit snacks. I'm just saying, right? Like if I'm on the couch and I can't get up and they want a quick snack, yes, I want to have the sliced apple and all the nutritious stuff. But when you can't move and you're just kind of like holding down the couch, you know, they're just going to do the best they can. And so I got tired of that for me, just for my family. And I'm a very active person. So it just wasn't, when I say it's not conducive to my lifestyle, it just wasn't. I mean, as a fitness professional, I love to travel. I'm training trainers. I'm teaching classes. I mean, I love fitness. I love to be active, and to have something so debilitating and literally have no answer as to, you know, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. Like, you know, we've got another specialist. I think they can help. It was a long, oh my gosh, I could talk about it for hours. It was a long journey of just circles, just like literally chasing a tail, trying to figure out like what I was going to do, until I got to a point and I was like, okay, I need to maybe take a little bit more, you know, like I was researching and doing all the appointments, but I was like, I need to maybe dial some of this, you know, I want to say, you know, authority maybe that I'd given them. I'm like, let me take a little bit of that back Because I mean, now I really feel like you guys are practicing medicine and I can practice on my own, right? Then I feel a little bit better when I'm having these, reactions or whatever, if I'm like actually, making these decisions versus, other people, because what happened is after all the modern medicine, after the hormone replacements, all this procedures, etc., I was only getting worse. And so that's where I was like, okay, something has to change. But when you're desperate, like I'm gonna say, when you're desperate and you're in pain and they offer something, you're like, yeah, sure, pop it right here, let's go. I'm ready. Like, I'm ready to be pain free. Yes. And it wasn't quite like that.
So did you have any surgeries at all?
No. So I ended up scheduling my hysterectomy. So I started to get anemic. I was bleeding and cramping all the time. To the point where I had to take leave from work, but I couldn't even tell them when I was returning. Like, it was debilitating. I was having a lot of issues. I mean, it was affecting me emotionally, physically, and financially, not being able to support my family as a single parent. And finally, my doctor just came to me and he was like, you're getting anemic, you're losing too much blood. It was also flaring, just the inflammation in itself. I couldn't, that I had gotten under control. Suddenly, I mean, I almost explain it like, those days that my hormones were ramped up or my period was coming, it was like those 10, 15 days, every prescription that worked those days. So those days, started to become more and more to where like my asthma was not controlled. I'd already had 4 sinus surgeries going through all this over the years. They were like, maybe we need to do another one. I'm like, you've been up there 4 times. Like, what could possibly be up there? Like, you've cleaned. I mean, to the extent of where I had a sinus surgery and my voice changed. I mean, that's when they're cleaning out a lot of gunk, a lot of polyps. Like, yes, I'm talking about, called my dad and he almost questioned who it was. Like, he knew it was me, but I sounded. So, I mean, I was kind of like, I a lot of dental issues, just a lot of other, injuries and things. And so I was like, okay, I bowed down and I'm like, okay, I will do the hysterectomy. If you're telling me this is my only option, cool. I'm down with it, whatever. And so what really happened is while I was waiting between February and July, the end of July, to have the surgery, it was kind of like, all right, like you're excited, you talk to the scheduler and you're like, great, I'm on the books, I'm ready. And then it was like, oh crap, now we've got February, March, April, May, June. Oh shit, 6 more months that I may not be able to function. So I was like excited, but I'm like, what am I going to do for the next half year? I've got 5-6 months where I can't be in pain. So to be honest, I mean, it's interesting. Some people start the health journey because they're like, I'm very holistic, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I was always healthy and into nutrition and women's health, but it got to a point where my hormones were so imbalanced. The stuff I was telling other people was working for them, as I was the fitness instructor that was literally expanding on stage, right? Like, I'm teaching the classes, you see me every day, yet my body's getting bigger, but I'm not pregnant, right? So suddenly I'm like, there must be a little bit more to this whole metabolism thing. When I started looking at my nutrition and things, it wasn't because I was like, oh, I want to heal my body. I wish I could say that. I was being so selfish. I just didn't want to be in pain. Like, that's really what it came down to. So the pain is what I was looking to dial down until I got to the surgery. It was like that little carrot was there and I was waiting to get there. But I'm like, in between, I may need to walk. I may need to shop. I may need to, as I started looking into just managing the pain, that's honestly, as I started making those changes, my body started to heal. My numbers started to drop, like just weird things that always happened that didn't happen. And I've always been one to have to log everything. It's interesting because when my hormones got worse, my allergies went from like ridiculous, like to where I remember there was a time, and let's talk about how iceberg lettuce has 0 nutrients, right? It's crunchy water. That's what I call it. It's crunchy water. Like every cheap restaurant is like, here, have a salad, iceberg lettuce. I mean, literally your blood sugar goes from like 60 to 200 because it's like 0, but it's like, I became allergic to iceberg lettuce. Like, that's when your immune system is like, okay, like if you can't eat iceberg lettuce, like there's nothing in it, right? Like there's just nutrients. There's nothing in it. I mean, it got to where I was allergy testing every 3 to 6 months because I would eat something that was maybe good in December and then I'd eat it in May and I'd have to use my EpiPen at a restaurant and they're like, what? I'm like, I don't even know. Like, so my allergies were so bad. I had to dial back and really start doing like the GAPS diet and all these other things. So as I started to change my nutrition, like some of these things that were recurring, like I always had SIBO and H. pylori. I would just bounce back one from another, right? So it's just like, oh, this month it's this prescription, this is that. And I would do the methane test and I would know when I drink water and then my stomach, I'd go from like, perfectly fine to like 9 months pregnant from drinking 8 ounces of water, right? So you're just like, great, it's back. So it started to be like, oh, hold it, I just drank water and it's time to, this is usually when it kicks back up. So my GI was kind of like, okay, cool. Like he's like, maybe you're over it, And so it got to where like my asthma wasn't as bad. I mean, a couple of months, probably never filled the prescription hardly ever, to, I mean, sucking on my rescue inhaler, being on a high dose of Advair, a back inhaler. I went from everything was great to this, it was just so escalated at that point. So when you're filling prescriptions and you're like, oh geez, I don't even need that anymore, or, you know, I'm not out, because it got to where it was like clockwork. So at that time, you know, my doctors are still, you know, we're talking about surgery, everything's scheduled. I've done my labs, but they continue to check my blood work because everything fluctuated just so drastically for me. It's like one day I'm allergic to this, and 2 weeks later, I'm like, you know, allergic to iceberg lettuce, which is weird. Now I'm fine. I don't eat iceberg lettuce because it doesn't have any nutrition. But if I had to eat it now, I'd be alive. Versus before, it was like EpiPen, code 10, you know, we're in a crisis type of situation. So it just progressed as we kept looking at things and the symptoms began to die down. I went in for some testing before my surgery. And essentially what happened is my doctor was like, hold it, like, he's like, some things aren't here. You know, it's all of a sudden he's questioning himself. And so he's like, I don't know what's going on, but he's like, come back. And he's like, I'm going to bring in another doctor. And I remember because it was at University Hospital, and it's always like where they're teaching people. And I'm like, no, I don't want a bunch of students while I'm sitting here spread eagle and we're all trying to figure it out. And he's like, no, I'm bringing in my mentor. And I'll never forget, he brought in his mentor, and his mentor was like, so why did you schedule? He's like, now the mentor is questioning my doctor, right? Which is making me feel very uncomfortable, because I'm like, you're supposed to be the expert. Like, I'm entrusting you. Now the person that trained you is questioning you in front of me, the patient, as to why you scheduled the surgery. And then he started looking and he's like, but hold it. And I'm like, yeah. So my doctor's like, I don't know what you're doing. He's like, I understand a little bit of the foods you're doing, what you're not doing, but he's like, I can't justify the surgery. He's like, I feel bad. He's like, if you want to come in 2 days and do it, I'll do it. He's like, it's your choice, insurance approved. But he's like, what you're doing is making it better. Like, my numbers had dropped. Yeah. I mean, for me, when my estrogen's really high, and for everyone it's a little different, but when my estrogen goes too high, my immune system just cuts off. Yeah. And so a little bit of it is because I had asthma and allergies as a child really bad. So I was on a lot of steroids, right? And when you're on prednisone and that kind of stuff, it just makes you more compromised. But I was on it for so long, and then had to be on it so long again when I was probably like 25 to 32, just because everything started flaring up. So it's like my immune system just shuts down. So he was just like, whatever you're doing seems to be working. You're not as inflamed, you know, your numbers are getting better. And it's like my estrogen that was like way up here, like it literally, there was almost a time it dropped below where it was supposed to be. And so they panicked a tiny bit, but they're like, let's just see, because they're like, you are all over. And so I literally started feeling better. Like, I was not living on the pain meds. I got to where I was taking so many pain meds, and I kind of embarrassed. I pulled over, and in the end, the officers were joked with me, and they kind of lived in my neighborhood, so I still know them, but they were like, we thought you were day drinking. And it was the fact that I hadn't taken the pain meds. So I was not actually driving under the influence of any medication. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't a day drinker. I was exhausted. It was like I was falling asleep while I was driving. Like, I was so fatigued. And so when I watched the video, I mean, I was swerving. I mean, obviously I would have pulled me over too, but clearly something wasn't right. And so it's so funny. They were like, we got it. They're like, when we threatened to make you like walk the line, I was like, I do all of it. He's like, you were just so compliant. So we just assumed there was something else. And they made me do a couple of the tests. And then they were like, well, what's your deal? And I'm like, but how do you explain to someone, like, you know, I'm on my period, and they're like, go get some Midol. And I'm like, no, I'm on my period. It means like my legs aren't working. Like, there's a sharp pain shooting down my back. It means I fall asleep when I'm driving. Like, you're pulling me over right now. Like, I legit like thought I was going to be arrested, right? For like a DUI, DWI, but it was like, I wasn't drinking. I wasn't over medicated with narcotics. I was fatigued. I mean, my estrogen goes up, my T3 and T4. I mean, like, my thyroid is like, oh great, I'm not going to participate for the next 6 months. And so I fall asleep. I mean, there's been times where I've been wide awake and I'm like, I can fall asleep standing up. So that was the fatigue. Those were all the things that started to get better. I mean, I went from being able to teach classes and do fitness. And it's interesting when you're very active, people are like, oh, you just need to sit down somewhere and relax. And you're like, it's not that. I mean, when I have a 45-minute class and I literally have to be on the couch for 5 or 6 hours, that's not just a kick butt workout. Like, that was like, my battery only had 30%. I used all of that during that little 45-minute workout. And I probably can't work out for the 8 teach, because then that means I have to use my memory, which I can't remember anything because my hormones are all over. And so it got to where it was such a drastic improvement. My doctor's like, if you want the surgery, and I remember he told me, he's like, if you want to do it, you know, whatever. And I'm like, let's pause, you know. And he said, you know, you could come to me. And I remember he's like, you could come to me into this office at Monday at like whenever you want it. He's like, it's always open. He's like, I will always have it on the books. But he's like, I think you're onto something, because everything they had tried, he's like, you go home. He's like, we schedule the surgery. And also people were like, they're like, maybe it's the placebo effect where you just know the help is coming. So you're like, yeah, everything is great. But I'm like, no, like it was literally like my blood work, my ultrasounds, all of these things, the dental issues, all these issues that I was having constantly. I'm talking about like always, like my poor ex-husband. I mean, some people look at their budget and it was like all of ours was going to medical to keep me alive, and it wasn't even working, right? Like it's better when you're getting some results, but he's like, you're still sick. I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm still very ill. And I mentioned I'm not going to work for the next 3 months either, because I probably won't be able to wake up. So it was just like it was hard on my family, but to see that, and for my own doctor and his mentor to be like, you're onto something. If you're willing to give it a try, because what we were doing was making you worse, give it a try. And it was comforting as well, because I knew that I could walk into that, office anytime between 8 and 5, not have to throw a fit, and he would wipe the schedule clean the next day. I wanted it. So I always had that. And we joke about it. He's like, you still need it? I'm like, I think I'm good. It's been several years. I mean, we're going on a good amount of years now, but if I need it, I will give you a jingle. But it worked. I mean, and it's interesting, because I know I talked about mindset previously on Instagram Live, and it's hard to have that positive mindset, right? When you're in pain all the time, you don't know where you're going to get any answers, and you just feel defeated. It's like you feel defeated before you even get out of the bed, right? And it's hard, but it was interesting. And I'm not going to sit here and say that once I switched my nutrition, it was a lot of going to Dr. Google, as I call it, combing through. This is before you had cool things like Instagram and Pinterest and all that. We had like forums where you had to like read all of it, go through, type you'd get an alert that someone responded. Like it wasn't as, everything's at our fingertips now, right? Like we can just lay and, talk to Alexis and just tell us everything, right? Back then we had to do the old school researching, staying up late at night, digging. And it was a lot of trial and error, I will be honest, which is why I created the program, because a lot of it, it's like looking back, I'm like, gosh, if someone could have just like handed me even 10% of what I know now, that 10% would have gave me hope, right? But when you have nothing and you're researching, lots of trial and error. I think back to some of the things I tried and I'm like, yeah, that's why it got worse. It was really dumb. But back then I didn't know, right? And you're desperate. I mean, someone would have said, drink some hot water and do 2 squats and 5 jumping jacks. And I would have did it. Like as dumb as it would have sounded, I would have tried it because I was so desperate to just get some relief. And so finally getting the nutrition down, in the beginning I was very supplement heavy. Like my body needed a lot of supplements. Like it just needed to heal. And now, I'm just taking, some basic multivitamins and things like that. But it was a lot of work, like just, getting the diagnosis and then just managing it until the surgery or, the fix was coming. That was probably the most crucial time for me, because that's when my body started to heal. And that's when I really, and like I said, I really only approached it because of the pain. It wasn't, let me try to heal my body and save money for surgery. It was more like, I just don't want to be miserable for the next, 5-6 months. I got to figure something out.
That's so interesting. And you've touched on quite a few things that I kind of want to go into a bit more, but was it your journey and the fact that you ended up getting naturally getting some results and relief from the pain that made you go into coaching and set up your own programs and coach women through their health as well, and in a more holistic way?
Absolutely, because I remember what it was like not having any support. I don't know how many naturopaths and chiropractors I do. And I honestly think, and I mean this in the nicest way, there are some great physicians out there, but I'm going to be very honest. There are people that are in health and wellness and they're really about the money. I mean, I would go to a chiropractor appointment and leave with $1,200 worth of vitamins. And I mean, a long list, and maybe I needed all those things, but I felt like there was maybe a better way to go about it. It's kind of like when you join the programs and then they're like, oh, here's my link. And by the way, you're going to need all these. And it's like, hold it. Like, is that even sustainable? Even if I can afford it? I mean, COVID is actually a very good example of what happens, because then you become dependent on these supplements. And then when your mail's running late, you don't have this foundation of how to do it on your own, or, the factory is closed, so you're not getting your Beachbody shake or whatever it is you've relied on all these years. Then you're like, well, I don't know how to eat healthy, because you've always relied on these things. And so I went to multiple appointments and I couldn't get answers. I mean, only a couple were transparent and be like, I don't know what we need to do. They're like, maybe leaky gut, maybe this, maybe that. I could respect that a lot more, but most of them were going to the appointments. I needed to buy a bunch of supplements. And once again, yes, I had to take a good amount. Respected it a lot more when someone really spoke to me and she was like, these are the things you can do with the foods and get an enzyme. If you want to get the others, it was like, you're not going to make it without it. And there were times I did all of it and it just didn't work. And I remember feeling very alone, because when people think about, like, Lupron puts you like in a medically induced menopause, right? Well, all my friends were like in their 30s. Like so they're like, they don't understand why, now they got it. Like I would break out in a hot flash and they would all fan me. I mean, I could sweat through an outfit. I mean, it was ridiculous, but it was very isolating. It's like, who do you talk to? It's like, my body, I feel like I'm 65, but I'm 30, it's like, where do I go? And literally going to people over and over and over again with zero answers. Like they cared, they would guess, but I was like, you don't understand. I'm in pain every night. I'm up guessing all night, right? You go to doctor's appointments and they just basically tell you there's no hope. Once again, keeping a positive mindset. It is easier now, but when you're going to appointment after appointment, and especially when you're angry, where they're like, well, I told you to take the birth control, and if you won't do that, then it's just nothing I can do. And you're like, well, I was hoping there was something else. And they're just like, I've had a doctor tell me, well, if you won't even do the basic thing by taking the birth control, she's like, I just don't even know if I want to keep seeing you. And I'm like, well, that's fine. I'll fire you before you fire me. That's
exactly. It's just taking that power back from them, really, because people, I think so many women just take it that they're in the white coat, they know what they're doing. And actually, like, most of it is the amount of hormones that I've been put on. Like, I went on the implant and that worked with me, and then I was constantly bleeding. So they're like, oh, here's the pill. So I'm on 2 sets. So I've actually taken myself off of the pill now, and I'm trying to get myself off the implant, because it's just, we go and we accept it. But now I'm doing all this different research, and I think that's the thing. Like, doctors are like, there's no cure for it. That's it. You're done with it. And I've been speaking to different people who have gone through endo, and there was April who I spoke to, and she said, I'm not an endo sufferer, I'm an endo survivor, because she's like, I fully believe that this is reversible. And the more that I'm learning, the more that I'm going down my route, I fully believe that this is something that we can actually completely put in remission if we just reduce the inflammation that's in our body. And I think
absolutely,
like your Instagram on the weekend about positive mindset, I'm really skeptical about going on forums. And I want Inner Women Wellness to be like, it does have a forum on it, but positivity only, because I think people can get stuck in, it's awful when you're not being listened to. And I know so many women have like committed suicide, that they haven't got the results, and it should never get to that point. But I think there is hope. And when you change your mindset, and I fully believe you can change your health. And like when you did that live and you're like, oh, you negative Nellies out there and all that. And it's like, it's so true. And when you have, and then it feeds into each other when everyone's just in that thing. But if you lift each other up and share your experiences and the things that you're learning, and like courses like yours, where there is hope out there. And I don't believe that it is something that we're stuck with for life anymore. I think us women coming together and doing the research and being our own advocates for our health, I think is a massive thing.
It is, but like I said, when I scheduled the hysterectomy, I felt like no other options were given, right? Like no one ever said like, hey, LJ, I know that you're a nutritionist. I know you've been doing this for about 20 years or so, or maybe like 15 at the time, to come in and question my judgment. But it was never like, like I don't remember any of my doctors being like, hey, maybe we can work on the inflammation, like when you inflame, it gets bigger and small. Like no one ever said that, right? So you're just like, well, I'm just stuck with this, like you feel hopeless. And like I said, yes, I'm all about mindset, but even like my little example I gave with the refrigerator, like, it's a constant reminder, right? Because it's like, as I said at home, like, great, what else could go wrong, right? I'm like, now I need to shop for a refrigerator. P.S. They're all closed because we're in COVID, but okay, yeah. And then it's like, yeah, person, sure enough, you open the door. I'm like, great, the whole door just came off. Like, and literally the repairman came this week and he's like, do you think you really pulled it hard? And I'm like, look at me. I do. There's a little bit of muscle. I'm like, as a parent, I'm like, this is something a kid would do. A child doesn't pay for anything and they'll swing stuff, nick the walls. But I'm like, I pay the bills around here. Yeah. Door off. Like, I'm like, does that make any sense? And he's like, yeah, but he's like, you lift weights. And I'm like, yeah. what weights would I be lifting that would rip the door off the hinges? Like it actually just slipped off the hinge somehow. And he's like, Nate. And I was like, I'm telling you, I was like, I tried to explain it to him and he's just like, what? And I'm like, never mind. I'm like, kind of put it in the universe by saying what else could go wrong, you know, because I pull it out and there's mold and all this other stuff. And sure enough, as I said, what could go wrong? Then the door fell off and I was like, well, and I was like, I'm not saying anything after that. I'm like, I could come and it'd catch on fire. Like, I don't know.
Honestly.
Right. Like it's cold, but somehow it would turn into a fire. So I'm like, I'm not even going to put any more negative energy out there. I'm just going to deal with the situation. But it's like, even me, like everything isn't all, you know, roses and, you know, different things like that. Like something just came up recently where I was like, I think I'm dealing with candida again. And I, you know, as I said on my Instagram, like I was very transparent. Like some people, you know, like they get upset and I'm like, yeah, I had my moment, you know, you were going to have your pity party and all that. But I'm like, okay, pity party aside, like, let's be grateful that, you know, okay, maybe the candida's back literally like a year later, like clockwork, like to the date a year later. And that sucked. And yes, I had a little moment, you know, I was like shedding a tear. My doctor's like, it'll be okay. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? And it's like, okay, I can be there for a second, but the whole, what is wrong with me? And why can't I ever get better? Or why am I being handed this, you know, deck? I can't stay there for too long, right? Because then that becomes depression and oppression. And even then, it's like when you're depressed and all that negative energy, you could take the strongest pain pill in the world and still be in pain. And so I know people don't want to hear that. And they're like, well, it's easy for you. You probably worked out this morning. And I'm like, yeah, because you know what? It's really easy for me now because I remember when I couldn't, right? Yeah. And I be on the couch all day. Like it's taken a lot for me to get here. Like, you know, cardio is tough for people that have chronic illnesses. Usually it'll flare you up. It's like you go into the gym at one weight, you work out, you kill yourself. The next day you're going to be 4 pounds heavier because your body literally just gets so inflamed, right? Like I've been there. So it's easier for me, yes, to be in that mindset now, but I have the negative mindset. I mean, I can think back to where I was, like not being able to just, and when I keep going back to family, but for a lot of people, you don't realize how much that affects your children when you're not feeling well and you're very sharp with them. Or for me, like I remember my son always wanted me to come. Like I wasn't the, what do you call it? The homeroom mother. Like my kid's 17 now. So I had to think like, what do they call it? Like I wasn't the homeroom mom, but I was the one, like if there's anything like fitness or active, they wanted me there because the other moms could barely breathe, right? So it's like, oh, that'll be an LJ thing, right? So it's like frontier days, running and playing with the kids. But it's like, it got to where, you know, the trainer mom couldn't come, and it wasn't because her trainer body couldn't do it. It's like, you know, I had a whole nother illness, and it's, once again, it's invisible. So then it's hard to explain to people. It's not that I don't want to volunteer. I just don't know if I'll be able to walk that day. Or I look at my calendar and I'm like, oh yeah, that's in period week, right? But I'm not going to tell that to a stranger. You're like, yeah, I just look like I'm really booked that week. Yeah. Week before and the week after, you know, and it's like, it just becomes awkward. Like you're making up these lies, but like it does affect your family. Like, you know, mom is like, yes, mom's energy controls everybody's energy in the home, right? So when the children need you, they need the support. Working with Erica, I thought about it more, how it affects you financially, because I had a client of mine and I was like, okay, take, you know, because she's like, well, it doesn't cost me money besides my prescriptions. And she's like, my prescriptions are almost like $5 or $10. So I was like, okay, cool. That was only, you know, we'll put that to the side. But then we start looking at missing 7, 8, 10, 11 days of work every month. And she's like, oh, suddenly she's like, I think that's probably where they're not giving me that management position. Bingo, right? Because they want you to be the manager and you're probably a kick butt employee, but they don't know what day you're going to show up. They're not trying to fire you. They manage a team. So I'm like, now you have to think about it. And she's like, oh, she's like, I always thought it was just, she's like, yeah, I miss like missing 8 to 11 days of work. I mean, 10 business days, that's like 2 weeks. Yeah. So it's like you're saying full time, but you really only go to week 2, you know, work 2 weeks out of the month. They're not upset with you. They're not trying to fire you, but it's hard for them to progress your career because they do not know when you're going to be there, you know, and they feel bad for you and everything. So when you put a dollar amount to that, where you think you work full time, 40 hours a week, 4 weeks, but actually you only work, you know, 20 hours here, 30 there, you know, you're actually a part-time employee, like then that's financially affecting your family. And so I think sometimes we just try to be, you know, we don't look at all the factors, or how I say, we just don't take it full 360. We're just like, oh, I'm in pain. And it's like, no, but it affects your children. It affects your energy. It affects your job. It affects the brain fog when you're falling asleep at work. You know, how can you be your best self when you went to a meeting and you can't. I remember a time where I was so fatigued. I started a new job, and it's so funny, I laugh. But I started a new job, and like the day that I set my password was not a good day for me. And to my job and be like, oh, and your boss is looking at you like, you set the password. And it's like, how do you explain to someone, well, there's some days I'm in this weird like endo coma and I'm half asleep, but I'm half awake. That's how I set the password and I don't know what it is. Like, how do you explain that, right? Like, it gets kind of awkward.
Yeah.
So the fatigue itself is just, yeah, like there were times I would say and do things, and I'm like, I couldn't remember to save my life. I just
bad, isn't it?
No, I couldn't. Yeah.
And so I think obviously you're from the sounds of what you said on the weekend, like the house that you grew up in was like the house that I think every kid should grow up in. The fact that a positive mindset was kind of
Absolutely
from your parents up, which I think is such an amazing thing. And I think it should be taught in schools, that so kids have this different mindset approach massively. But so obviously you got your fitness and stuff, and like I really struggled when I was ill not being able to work out, because that's my release, and the pain just got so bad. But now, like, what is your morning routine that just sets you up, that puts you like top of your game mindset and nothing can hit you?
Well, I have to be honest, it's changed. March changed up the morning routine. So prior to March, I'm a coach. I love fitness. For some people, like pouring into themselves, like, you know, going for their coffee with their friends and stuff. For me, coaching and teaching classes, like that's what filled my cup. That was the beginning of my day. I'd either do my personal workout, and then I would go coach at the gym, and then I'd come and coach here. And then I'd go and coach at the gym a little in the evening and the afternoon. And by then I'd come home and like my cup is full, all is well. Then we had March 16th where they were like, oh, we're closing the gym. I'm like, what? That's my life. What?
Yeah.
You know, I can't see people. I mean, so then we had that, right? So now my routine has changed. It was interesting. It became, I don't want to say I got depressed, but I think for a couple weeks I had to just kind of like, we really aren't going to, I mean, it just like I had to settle in. Yeah. And then after it settled in, I was like, okay, honey, you need to reel it in, right? Because I'm like, now we're stress eating and there's all these other things. So I had to change my routine, and it was honestly just myself. I love to coach. I love to teach, right? So if I can't go to the gym or, you know, whatever, then it's like, okay, I'm doing online Zoom classes. I'm coaching my clients. So rather than start my day with running errands and stuff like that, like I'm a people person, I'm an extrovert. I need that energy exchange. So what I did is I just started, you know, maybe I will coach a couple clients at 6 a.m., you know, 5:30, 6:30, and 7. Then maybe I'll do my own thing, my own workout. Then I'm energized, you know, I'm able to give and help others. That's what I loved. And I think that's what the issue was the first few weeks. It's like, we hadn't, like we knew about online, but we just, you know, we're like, we're not going to be here for long. And then it settled in like, no, honey, you're going to be here for quite a while.
Yeah.
Go ahead and figure out how to use, we need to get lighting, cameras. Like we had to the whole home. Like it was a process. My once dining room is now my training center. And now my living room / office. And then someone's like, you don't have a kitchen table anymore? I'm like, no, we don't, because we have a squat rack now. We've had to evolve, right? This is a COVID-19 prepped home now. We're pandemic ready. Kitchen table, you can sit on the couch, you can sit at this glass desk, you can sit over by the squat rack, but we've had to evolve, right? So now I struggled, but now for me, I start coaching in the morning. You know, I have my meditation and things like that, but I love to coach. So it may be a hormone consult, it could be personal training, it could be an online Zoom class. So for me, I had to kind of go back to that and really just go back to what I was doing, but just tweak it a little bit, right? Like everything is online now. And then I do my personal stuff, and then I engage with community. So my endo sisters, you know, commenting with people, you know, working with people, DMs. I mean, I am maybe doing a little TikTok training now. I mean, that's a little intense. So I've got a little research to step up my TikTok game. So like I said, if you have the answers, slide it in the DM. I am humble. I'll take the advice. So I had to just go back to my normal routine. There was a couple of weeks where I was just kind of in this funk and I didn't know what to do and blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting. I started having like, it wasn't really flares, but like my anxiety was like up to 1,000,000. Like I wasn't sleeping. And if I was eating way too much. It wasn't the wrong stuff. I was just all the extra time. I'm like, oh, let me just fuel my body for the next 10 years, right? No, not really. So once I dialed it in, that's where I'm back at. I'm coaching in the mornings. I do my own little thing. I'm not really a breakfast person. I don't break my fast till probably around noon. I always know that I must have taken too much sugar or maybe too much protein, because if I do my macros and everything's balanced and I log my food, then I'll stop eating around 8 or 9. So I don't need to eat till around noon. Today we're like 153 Mountain. I haven't ate yet. I'll probably grab something because then I have another call at 3:30. But so then I have lunch later. But I have to maintain that routine. I'm very like a routine person. So pouring into people and coaching, it's my passion, it's my love. So I just had to find a way to do that, and then save the 45-minute commute in Denver traffic and all that stuff. It just freed up a lot of my time, but at first it was a huge adjustment. Now we're kind of opening, and I am teaching a couple of classes. I teach a couple on Sunday, and I may start teaching a little bit more outside of the home. But to be honest, it's very interesting. People with chronic illness or that have autoimmune, they've always been more at home, right? Like the options, everyone else is freaking out because they can't go to the store every day and, buy frivolous stuff they could have all bought at once, right? Because that's just their routine. You just buy it here or there. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I have to like plan and know what I eat. It's just like, what? So there's also a lot of people that are already at home, right? So now some of these additional services that we're offering, I'm going to really stick with the virtual, sit with the platform. Plus, there's all the talks of, second flare, not second flare, like second waves and all these things. And so just being a lot more prepared. I've definitely stepped up my technology game. I think for all those parents that could barely FaceTime and now you're, doing Zoom calls with your child's teacher, congratulations, right? We're all set up 2020 where you're getting smarter. So I'm definitely going to transition doing some things out of the home, but predominantly I am going to stay online. I also like it because it broadens my reach. I don't know people and all of that, but just being able to hear the stories and connect with people literally all over the world. Endo has brought us together, and it's about awareness and education, but it's also just realizing like it's a community. And I love that. I love community. I love working together. Like you were saying before we got on, just the collaborations and working with others, like that is what keeps me fueled. That's what keeps me going. And it also provides not just hope to myself, but others, because there are other people, without maybe Instagram, they wouldn't get any positivity. They wouldn't hear from anyone that there's a way to manage. So just knowing that we're making an impact as a collective is why I will remain online and start offering more online.
Yeah, massively. I think that's what's really changed for me, is the fact that I had such a negative opinion of social media, and I was like, it feeds everything. Like, I just don't like it. And like all my friends, obviously, because I've been building in women's wellness and connecting to people, they're like, Georgia, like you were like a mom with technology. Like you've had to learn it all. And I'm like, I love learning about it, but actually, like, it's amazing the community that we have online of just people that want to make a difference and want to get their voice heard. And I think, like we were saying before, with the masculine energy has kind of, and the fast-paced world has made us women be like, oh, we're all against each other and we've got to go a million miles per hour. And actually COVID has made us stop, reassess, and just channel more of our natural feminine energy, which is working together. And I've been overwhelmed by the support and positivity of like everyone just coming together who just want to get heard and just share the stories and stuff. Like, it's an amazing community we have, and I am so hopeful that we can change it a bit more and kind of educate the traditional medical world to look at it in a different way and look at it at a whole round approach, really. But I think what I would love to kind of get from you is, what can we expect from your Endo Warrior course that you have July 13th?
Yes, July 13th. So registration will be opening, I forgot the countdown. I'd have to look back at my own Instagram post for the days, for the countdown, but soon. So we'll probably open it up at the beginning of July 13th, Endo Warrior Academy. So it's 4 weeks. We do nutrition. So it's a full holistic approach. So we're looking at the nutrition, we're looking at the lifestyle, the mindset, and the fitness aspect. And I know for some people, the fitness isn't really important. And I want to be very clear, just because you sign up for the program doesn't mean I'm going to have you doing like, 20 minutes of workout out every day. If you're doing workout, it's great. We're going to look at it and tweak it to kind of minimize the flares. And then it's also just the education of what to do after a surgery. They give you all the don't, but then the do list is like non-existent, right? So it's like, what foods do you need to do to heal your body? You're going to get the recipes, the meal plans, all the encouragement and the support from me. So you basically have me on speed dial for 4 to 6 weeks. And even after that, obviously you can reach out, but I'm there to really encourage and help people. It's a lot of information, which is why we do live Zoom calls. So it's live in the comfort of your home. So no excuses. You and your puppy can cuddle up and learn and work with your endo community, but it's a lot of information. And just with me coming from a strong fitness background, I really like to be very hands-on and just when I say hand holding, and not in a negative way, but I want to make sure you're getting results, right? Like I don't want to just email you something and then hear 6 months later that you're like, oh, I didn't even go to the second one because I didn't understand the first one. So I like to really work through and do some practical things where we understand like, you know, what we're going to be doing. And I'm going to actually post a testimonial probably in a couple hours of one of my from the last Endo Warrior Academy, but it is definitely life-changing. It gives you that foundation, like I said, because when you're hopeless and you just don't know where to go and you're just clinging on and buying every vitamin that someone recommends, and then you look on your counter, you've got like 100 vitamins and you're like, I know what I need, right? It's just kind of going back to the basics, giving you that foundation, because the information you learn in this course is going to help you manage your symptoms for years to come. It's not just a diet, it is a lifestyle, right? So we're not just going to do it and try to lose a bunch of weight. And, you know, it's like the whole, you know, people are going to a wedding or in a wedding, they want to lose the weight and that's just for the wedding, right? But we're looking to be like pain-free past 4 weeks, right? So we're looking to make those lifestyle changes. And so you really get all that information to have that foundation. And it's really tailored for every student because it's not cookie cutter. It may not work for you, but we do work collectively as a team. So it's super fun. So we do live coaching, and then you've got all those other resources with fitness and nutrition and everything.
Sounds amazing. So just quickly, just before we wrap up, I've just got one question for you. With your, so you say about lifestyle and stuff, have you minimized like your toxin exposure? Have you gone down that route of kind of with your plastics in your house and different products? Have you completely stripped that back as well? Has that improved?
Yes, I've done a lot of the removal of the plastics. For me, I also had to look at my water. That was big for me. And simply because with my estrogen being crazy for so long, my thyroid is always going to need a little additional support. So being hypothyroid, kind of TMI, but if you know you're hypothyroid, you know it's true. Like you take your pill and then you literally just pee all day. Like you can drink gallons of water. It doesn't matter. You're going to drink it and you might as well just sit there because you're going to literally pee it out, right? Your body is not hydrating properly. Yeah. So for me, I had to switch to alkaline water. Like out of all the things I changed, like the grass-fed meats and organic, for me, the water was huge. My body was acidic, just, you know, of having all those challenges and taking all the prescriptions and everything. So I had to switch to alkaline water to actually hydrate my body, because it got to where I was doing all these things, but it's like, I'd always go in for blood work and they're like, oh, you're so dehydrated. I'm like, really? Because I had like a gallon of tap water is estrogenic, and I was doing bottled water, and then I found out it was just the same pretty much, you know. So I wasn't able to get spring water all the time. I mean, yes, I'm close to the mountains, but I may not have 3 hours to drive all the way up there every day and get the water. So for me, the biggest change was switching to alkaline water. And that really made a huge difference, not only with just my acidic level and not being, you know, so acidic and inflamed, but also where my body was actually hydrating, and I was able to get better results with my thyroid medication. Like it was just kind of balancing everything out. But there's been a lot of lifestyle changes. And then there's some things where, like our perfumes and our lotions and all that fun stuff. And for me, that's another big one. Like if it smells super great, I used to be a regional manager with Dillard's, and like, if it smells awesome and it's very, you know, fragrant, for me, and it's for a lot of people that you're estrogen dominant or you're really watch the products, you know, like I was slathering all this stuff on and going to bed, and it was like, yeah, it was not helping whatsoever. So I had to do a lot of searching. And sometimes I wasn't able to find like the perfect mix. And so I'm like, I guess there's just one less product I'm going to use, right? Like it just is what it is. A lot more essential oils, but I had to change the water was the biggest thing. And then the products that I was using, like, even though it was supposed to be helpful for acne and all that, because at the end of the day, the acne was there, but it was more of a hormonal imbalance. It wasn't just acne because I wasn't washing my face, because Lord knows I was using enough products to clean, you know, 25 faces, and was still having like the outbreaks and, you know, just like the acne and the hormonal acne. So the water was huge for me, just flushing out all the toxins and just, changing a lot of my products. You know, even though it's like buy one, get 25 free, I just, it was
cannot do it.
Right.
And so where can people, so just kind of closing it, what I like to ask everyone is, firstly, what are your 3 top tips for women that just don't know where to begin, and where can we find you?
I'll do where you can find me. So ljspowerhouse.org, or on Insta, it's ljs_powerhouse. You can DM me. I'm on Facebook under LJ Johnson. I'm on a bike, I think. I may never through. It'll be me. Trust me. I look like me in person. And there's not enough photoshopping that can change that. I'm me. Main 3 things, I would say, find a support system. And it doesn't have to be a collection of doctors. It doesn't have to be, it could be a neighbor. It could be a family member. You need people to support you, because there are going to be days when you do not feel as strong as needed to fight this fight. And I'm not saying fight in a negative way, but your body is kind of fighting against you. There's all these things, you know, like you said, external factors, environmental, everything's kind of pushing against you. You need a support system, because there are going to be days that you're not going to have the strength. And that's when your support system can lift you up. That's like I think that's going to be my 2020 theme. Like, support systems are huge. Next, be an advocate for yourself. I always refer to it like, when you go in for a doctor's appointment and it's their first patient, you know, they have you fill out all this paperwork, they want you, and they're kind of trying to figure out, you know, what they're going to do, what they can help you with. But I also would say, when you show up to that appointment, you're essentially interviewing that doctor as well. Don't just take it like, oh, my insurance said I have to go here. If they're not a good match for you, they're not a good match for you. You need to have them send you to someone else, because what happens is I think when you go in and you're not kind of interviewing and not really, it's a good provider for you, right? Because if you're uncomfortable with the provider, or they don't believe you're in pain, it's like, how are you ever going to get an answer if they don't even believe you? I've been to many appointments, and like I said, you know, I kind of consider it an interview. Like, when you go to a job, you know, and the job's like, yes, I love your skills, we love your resume, come onto our team, we're heading in the same direction. And that's the same thing when you get a physician. You need to interview them. You know, if they're all about pain pills and maybe you need them, but they're resistant to looking at natural things, or they're even resistant to hearing you out because they're like, oh, you look fine, and let's probably just need some birth control. Like, if you can't get past that, that's not the doctor for you, because you're going to continually be frustrated. You're going to be crying before, during, and after the appointments, because I was there, right? Yeah. When I felt worse after the appointment, I was like, this isn't the doctor for me. Like, I'm not being heard, right? Yeah. So you need the support system. You need to interview your doctors, turn those tables around, right? And be an advocate for yourself. I mean, always be coachable, be willing to learn. And just know you have to stand up. You know your body. Yes, they have the white coat. Yes, they have all the pictures and, you know, degrees on the wall, but they're not you, and they don't know your body. If it doesn't feel right to you, even though your doctor's like, oh yeah, that's just periods, women, yeah, you're gonna be pain. Like, I'm telling you, if it doesn't feel right to you, or if you're like, this isn't normal, like this is my normal, but everyone else is like, no, I'm not having that issue. You need to find a doctor that's going to hear you out, and take some time to research it. If you don't have the time to research it, that's when you get coaches. That's when you get a dietitian and nutritionist. You get someone to support you, because then they can offload like 20 years onto you, you know, in 10 minutes, versus you spending your life in pain for the next 20 years trying to get all the answers. Like, the support system, interview those doctors. I'm sorry, doctors, you're probably just like, oh, geez, the secret's out. Yeah. We are interviewing you to see if we want. And then just know your body. I mean, be an advocate for yourself. And if something is not right, don't just brush it to the side. You have to, I mean, this is the only body you have, right? Like, our immune system and everything is dependent on our choices. And so we need to make, I think we've learned that a lot in the last few months, like immune system and being able to stay strong, not just physically, but mentally and everything, and emotionally, is very important. But we have to be an active participant in it. We can't just take everyone's word for it and go through the hoops, because if it's not working for us, I mean, why live in pain? Like, why second guess yourself every day and all that? It's just not needed.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So that's such good advice. Like, honestly, I could talk to you for hours. Honestly, like, it's so, you're just a fountain of knowledge, and I just, as I say, absolutely love your vibe and love what you're doing, and it's amazing. So honestly, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me this evening. It's been amazing.
No, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
No worries. Take care. I'll be in touch.
Bye.
Bye.